My name is Marcus Webb, I'm 28, and until all of this started, the worst thing I dealt with at night was my upstairs neighbor vacuuming at 2 a.m. But now, I'd give anything to go back to that because at least vacuums don't watch you while you sleep. It began 3 nights after I moved into a small ground-floor apartment in a nowhere town just outside Phoenix, a cheap place with peeling walls, a permanently humming AC unit, and blinds that rattled when the wind blew, but it was mine. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I'd taken a new job on a late shift as an audio technician for a freight dispatch company. Something quiet, something stable, something that didn't require me to talk to many people. I'd gotten used to being alone. I liked it. So when I came home that night, kicked off my steel-toe boots, dropped onto my mattress, and passed out in my black hoodie and jeans, it felt like the start of something normal, until my phone buzzed at 3:12 a.m. with a notification that froze my blood. New video saved to camera roll. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I'd pocket-tapped something before falling asleep. Maybe the phone glitched. But when I opened my gallery, I saw a thumbnail that made my throat clamp shut. A dark still frame of me, asleep in my bed, viewed from the foot of the mattress like someone had been standing there holding the camera. My hands went ice cold. I lived alone. I hadn't recorded anything. And the angle wasn't from my phone, it was elevated, steady, perfectly still. Heart hammering, I clicked the video. It lasted 11 seconds. The first few showed me motionless on the mattress, breathing shallowly. Then around second 7, something shifted in the darkness behind the camera. Just a tiny vibration like someone adjusting their stance, and the shadow at the edge of the frame stretched upward, impossibly tall. The video ended abruptly, like someone had hit stop. I sat frozen in bed for what felt like hours, the room suddenly too quiet, the air too thick. I checked my door, still locked. I checked the windows, latched, blinds down. I checked under the bed like a terrified kid because my brain refused to rule anything out. Nothing. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it had to be a prank or a glitch until the second night. I'd set up my phone with a passcode, enabled every security feature I could find, shoved it in the drawer across the room, and went asleep telling myself there was no way anything could happen again. But at 3:12 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I was too scared to move. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the AC, my heart beating so loud I could barely hear anything else until I did. A soft, rhythmic clicking, not from the vents, not from the AC, from the foot of the bed, like fingernails tapping fabric. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare open my eyes all the way. I waited until dawn before grabbing the phone. New video saved. My stomach dropped. The thumbnail showed the same angle as before, but this time the camera was closer, only a few feet from my face. I hit play with shaking fingers. The video began with me asleep on my side. Then slowly something leaned into the frame from the left. A silhouette, tall, thin, neck slightly bent as if studying me. No facial features, just darkness shaped vaguely like a person, except the proportions were wrong. The arms too long, the head tilted at an angle no human neck could handle. At second 9, the silhouette raised one hand, long finger-like shapes that curved slightly and reached toward my sleeping face. The camera shook as if whoever held it adjusted their grip. The video cut. I staggered away from the phone like it had bitten me. I swear for a moment the air in the room felt disturbed, like someone had moved through it seconds earlier. I called the police. They searched the place, found nothing, suggested I'd staged it or downloaded something without realizing, recommended I get more sleep. Useless. That night before work, I bought a cheap indoor security camera system, one that uploaded to the cloud, not my phone. If something was entering my room, I wanted proof I could hand someone. But before I got the cameras mounted, an emergency alert blasted through my phone so violently it nearly dropped from my hands. Statewide warning: if you experience unexplained nighttime recordings, do not review them. Do not acknowledge any figure seen NEAR your bed. Seek bright, constant light until further notice. My blood froze. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a glitch. Someone official knew. Someone had seen this before. I reread the alert maybe 10 times before realizing new text was appearing beneath it, line by line. These entities learn from observation. Avoid all reflections after 3:00 a.m. Avoid dark corners. Do not sleep alone if possible. I didn't move for a full minute. The apartment felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were leaning in. And behind me, near the mattress, I heard something shift. Not loudly, just enough. Just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. I turned slowly. Nothing there, but the blanket was wrinkled in a shape that looked like a knee print. Something had been standing there, watching, learning. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't blink much either, because now I knew something terrifying. The videos weren't warnings. They were progress reports, and whatever filmed me was getting closer. I didn't go to work the next day because I couldn't convince myself that stepping outside my apartment wouldn't give whatever was filming me an invitation to slip deeper into my life. Like leaving the boundaries of my home would break some thin barrier I didn't know existed. So I stayed inside, pacing from wall to wall in my black hoodie and jeans. Steel-toe boots still laced like I was ready to run at any second. Replaying the emergency alert over and over in my mind like a broken warning siren. If the alert existed, that meant the government, or someone pretending to be the government, knew about the phenomenon. Knew enough to tell people not to look at their own recordings. But I already had, twice, and both times the thing had been closer. The cloud security cameras arrived in the afternoon, and setting them up gave me something to focus on besides the feeling that something was standing just barely out of sight in the darker corners of the room. I mounted one in the hallway, another above my bedroom door, another in the living room pointed toward the sliding glass door. I made sure none pointed toward my bed. If the alert said not to look, then I wasn't going to allow more recordings. But I needed to know if something entered the apartment. I needed proof. Once everything was set, I sat at the kitchen table and watched the live feeds on my phone. Nothing, just my crappy apartment dimly lit, empty still. I tried to tell myself it was over, that maybe the thing had only been passing through, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, pressurized, like sound was being swallowed before it formed. Around dusk, the notification started. Motion detected, living room. I opened the feed so fast I nearly dropped my phone. Nothing there. The camera was pointed straight at the sliding glass door, which was still locked, blinds drawn. I waited. The motion alert stopped. Then another one popped up. Motion detected, hallway. Again, nothing on the feed. No shadows, no shapes, no flicker of movement. Just the narrow hallway with its peeling paint, flickering overhead bulb, and the faint hum of the AC unit at the far end. I turned the sound all the way up on my phone and listened. Nothing. But the air felt heavier, like someone had exhaled slowly right behind me. I checked the bedroom door feed. Still nothing. I told myself the cameras were glitching, that cheap systems could misread dust particles or air movement, but the part of me that still remembered the silhouette reaching for my sleeping face wasn't buying it. Hours crawled by. I didn't sleep. Didn't blink much either. Every now and then I checked the feeds again and again, until the paranoia started twisting in on itself, until I began to imagine movement that wasn't there. Around midnight, I finally tried to lie down. Not to sleep, sleep felt suicidal, but to rest my spine from the constant tension. I lay on the mattress fully dressed, boots still on, flashlight in one hand. The room was dim except for a small lamp in the corner. I watched the light more than the shadows. Shadows were too unpredictable. And then from the hallway camera feed, my phone lit up. Motion detected, hallway. I opened the feed. At first, I didn't see anything wrong, just the same empty hall, but something in the angle felt slightly off. The hall looked narrower, as if the walls were leaning inward. No, that wasn't it. Something else was there, something faint, too faint to name at first, until I saw a shape on the floor near the hallway carpet. A shadow, a stretched, crooked shadow, but there was nothing physically casting it. I sat upright. The shadow moved almost imperceptibly, like it was adjusting its posture. I didn't breathe. The shadow elongated, sliding along the floor, its edges too sharp, too deliberate to be a trick of light. Then the shadow rose, slowly, silently, like a person standing up in reverse slow motion, its form growing taller, the upper part unfurling like fabric pulled upward by invisible strings. I stared, unable to blink, unable to swallow. And the thing on the camera, whatever it was, began to tilt its head slowly, as though listening, as though looking for me. I shut off the phone so fast my thumb stung. The room felt instantly darker without the screen. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I sat there waiting for something to happen next, waiting for the blinds to rustle or the door handle to twitch or the AC hum to distort into a voice. But nothing happened. That was almost worse, because the quiet meant the thing wasn't moving blindly. It was waiting, observing, learning. When dawn finally came, I checked the camera system. All the footage from the night was gone, deleted, no motion events, no saved clips, system logs wiped. But there was something new. A file labeled Preview 3:12 a.m. My stomach turned. That was the same minute the first 2 videos had appeared. I clicked it before I could talk myself out of it. The preview wasn't like the others. It wasn't footage from inside the apartment. It was outside, somewhere dark, somewhere wooded, somewhere that definitely was Phoenix. The camera wasn't handheld this time. It was mounted, but the image shook every few seconds like something was brushing against the device. The preview lasted only 4 seconds, long enough for a shape to step into frame. Tall, thin, its arms far too long, its head tilted at the exact wrong angle. It leaned close to the camera until its shadowed face filled the entire screen. Then it whispered one word in my voice. "Ready." The preview cut out. The file deleted itself. My phone crashed so hard it shut off entirely. When it restarted, every wallpaper, every sound setting, every file name was replaced with a single line of text. "Prepare for recording." That's when I understood something horrifying. The thing wasn't just watching me, it was rehearsing me. I spent the entire morning trying to steady my breathing because it felt like my lungs belonged to someone else now. Like the simple act of inhaling was something being watched, studied, copied, and perfected somewhere out of sight. And the more I paced the apartment in my black hoodie and dark jeans, steel-toe boots thumping across the floorboards, the more I felt like I was walking in a room I no longer owned, a life I no longer controlled. Because something else had entered it long before I realized it was there. I smashed my phone against the counter until the screen cracked and the casing bent, but even after the battery fell out, I heard it vibrate once, a dead device reacting like it was alive, and I kicked it across the room, terrified it might light up and show me another preview I couldn't handle. The cloud camera system was next. I ripped all 3 units off the walls and shoved them into a trash bag, though even as I carried it to the dumpster outside, I felt like the bag twitched, like something inside shifted, but maybe that was just my nerves breaking under the weight of what I'd seen. When I came back inside, the apartment felt wrong, not violated exactly, but rearranged, as if the air pressure had been nudged or the shadows had been stretched a fraction longer than I remembered. And I couldn't shake the sensation that the thing had been there while I stepped outside for 30 seconds, using that tiny window to study everything I touched, memorizing the rhythm of my footsteps. I went from window to window, checking the locks, pressing my fingers against the blinds to make sure nothing stared back from outside, and each time I touched the glass, a faint static shock crackled beneath my skin, like my reflection was pushing back. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed air, even if stepping outside made me feel like a spotlight was shining on me. So I left the apartment and walked toward the dispatch center where I worked, trying to convince myself that being around other people, other living, breathing men who could confirm I wasn't losing my mind, might ground me. But the entire walk there, the empty road kept shifting at the edges of my vision, like someone was following a few steps behind but ducking away every time I turned. When I reached the dispatch building, the glass front door warped with my reflection, stretching it vertically for a split second before snapping back to normal, and I nearly turned around and fled right then. Inside, the other technicians were at their stations, headsets on, staring at their monitors full of audio feeds and freight signals. I took my seat, logged in, tried to act human, but I couldn't stop glancing at the small black dome camera positioned high in the corner of the room. A normal security camera, harmless, except halfway through my shift it turned. Not the lens, cameras do that, but the casing itself. It twisted on its mount like something inside had leaned too close to the plastic shell and made it bulge outward. The technician beside me scratched his beard and muttered something about bad wiring, but I saw the shadow inside the reflection of the dome, the shape of a head slightly too tall, too narrow, watching only me. I felt every muscle in my back tighten like piano wire. I told my supervisor I needed fresh air and walked to the break room, which was empty except for a humming vending machine and the buzzing fluorescent light that flickered twice before steadying. But the moment I stepped inside, every reflective surface, microwave door, metal sink, paper towel dispenser, dimmed, as though something had passed in front of an invisible light source behind me. I swallowed hard. "I know you're here," I whispered, which I regretted instantly because acknowledging it felt like feeding it. The fluorescent light buzzed louder. A cold breath brushed my neck, except it wasn't breath. It was pressure, the sense of a presence leaning close. In the microwave reflection, a tall shadow stood behind me, two long-limbed, head tilted at that same impossible angle but with no facial features. Just a smooth, dark surface like someone had erased every detail. I spun around, but nothing was there. When I looked back, the microwave reflection showed only the empty room. I left work without clocking out. I didn't care. I felt hunted, targeted, pulled along by something I couldn't understand. When I got back to my apartment, the air smelled faintly metallic, as though something had been scraping across the vents. My damaged phone lay on the kitchen floor even though I'd left it on the other side of the room. The cracks in the screen had rearranged into a strange branching pattern, like veins or roots. I didn't touch it. I went straight to the bedroom, sat on the mattress, and stared at the wall until the light outside dimmed entirely. Then, right when the apartment fell into that dead quiet, I heard a small, soft distortion. Not from the hallway, not from the vents, from under the bed. A faint, rhythmic sound, the exact sound of a phone recording. A red LED blinked once from the shadows below, followed by a whisper so quiet it barely existed. "Ready when you are, Marcus." My whole body locked. I didn't move, couldn't move. Then something slid forward in the darkness, a shape too tall to fit under the bed, unfolding itself like broken scaffolding. I leapt off the mattress, stumbling backwards. The thing rose from beneath the frame, its form still half shadow, half solid, like reality hadn't fully caught up with it. Its face was my face, but unfinished, features stretching and collapsing as if it was practicing, learning the architecture of me. It stepped closer, silent, deliberate, and tilted its head at the same unnatural angle I'd seen on the videos. "Almost perfect," it whispered in a voice nearly identical to mine, just slightly delayed as though playing a corrupted recording. I bolted for the door, grabbed my keys, and fled the apartment without looking back. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, and even then I felt like something was matching my stride perfectly, just one step out of view. I drove until sunrise, parking in a rest stop miles away, too scared to sleep, too exhausted to think, staring at my trembling hands and the growing realization that the thing hadn't been trying to scare me. It had been studying me, rehearsing me, and very soon it wouldn't need me anymore. I sat in my car at that rest stop until the sun climbed high enough to bleach the world into something that felt safe again, even though I knew sunlight didn't matter to the thing that had crawled out from under my bed, the thing practicing my voice, my posture, my breathing, like it was rehearsing to step into my life and slide me out of it entirely. But I forced myself to think, to plan, to do anything except collapse into panic, because panic felt like the exact weakness it wanted from me. After hours of fighting the urge to drive until the desert swallowed me, I decided I needed help, not from the police or the dispatch center or anyone normal, because normal people couldn't comprehend something like this, but from whatever agency had sent the emergency alert that warned me in the first place. Someone out there knew the rules. Someone knew what these things were. Someone must have documented this phenomenon long before it reached me. So I drove back toward town, not to my apartment, but to the only place that made sense. The old maintenance warehouse behind the dispatch center, the one rumored to have federal ties and off-limit zones even the supervisors didn't question. It wasn't much to look at: corrugated metal siding, boarded windows, a heavy steel door with a rusted keypad. But I knew from working at dispatch that this building housed older analog systems and archived logs dating back decades, relics from a time before digital surveillance took over. If anything was written down about the sleep recording phenomenon, it would be here. I parked behind a storage container, pulled my black hoodie tighter, and forced myself toward the door. The keypad was dead, but the side panel was loose, exposing ancient wiring. I don't know much about electrical work, but I knew enough to twist two wires together and force the magnetic lock to click open. The warehouse smelled like old oil and dust, the kind that coats your tongue and makes you feel like you're breathing history. Rows of metal shelves extended into the shadows, holding stacked binders, outdated equipment, and unlabeled boxes. I moved slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip, boots echoing softly across the concrete. Every sound felt too loud, too revealing. Near the far wall, I found a filing cabinet older than I was, its drawers jammed with manila folders. Most were routine incident reports, equipment failures, transmission malfunctions, personnel issues. But one drawer had a red sticker that read, "Audio anomaly cases locked." The lock had long since rusted. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were folders labeled with phrases that made my scalp crawl. Unauthorized night observers, mimicry events, identity displacement. My heart thudded. I pulled out the thickest folder and opened it. Inside were reports from all over the state, men waking up to videos of themselves sleeping, recordings taken from impossible angles, silhouettes standing over their beds, shadow-like figures rehearsing speech patterns, body language, breathing rhythms. Some victims disappeared. Some were found wandering highways at night, repeating fragments of their own recorded voices like corrupted files. One line appeared in nearly every report. The entity completes assimilation only after observing the subject for a cumulative 12 hours. Another note, observation accelerates when subject acknowledges the entity vocally. I felt sick. How many hours had it watched me? How many times had I spoken aloud? My chest tightened as I read further. Entities appear to originate from reflective or semi-reflective distortions, mirrors, screens, glass, low-light shadow planes, or corrupted video recordings. Once tethered to a subject, the entity attempts to learn the subject's identity with increasing precision. If assimilation completes, the subject often vanishes. In rare cases, the subject is found replaced by the entity in physical, functional form. Another note, handwritten in the margin. Replaced individuals behave normally at first but display subtle timing errors, delayed responses, mirrored gestures, mismatched blinking patterns. I closed my eyes. I had seen that in the microwave, in the dispatch center camera dome, in the shadow rising from my hallway. The reports ended abruptly around 15 years ago, replaced by a single sheet printed with a government seal. Research transferred to Project MIRRORGATE. All materials classified. Cease local documentation. I exhaled slowly, my breath shaking. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. And the worst part, no report mentioned survival. Every case file ended with unresolved, subject missing, or entity untraceable. As I placed the folder back, I heard a soft creak from the far end of the warehouse. Not like the building settling, more deliberate, more human. My flashlight beam shook harder as I raised it toward the noise. At the end of the aisle stood a tall figure silhouetted in the dim light filtering through the warped metal wall. My breath stopped. The figure stood perfectly still, head tilted, not right, not wrong, but practiced, like someone replicating a gesture they'd seen only once. My voice cut through the silence from the shape, my exact voice, but too smooth, too calm. "Marcus, you forgot to lock your apartment." My stomach plunged. I stepped back. The figure stepped forward. Its movements were slow, precise, rhythmic, like playback at half speed. "You left the lamp on," it said, still in my voice. "I learned your footsteps, your breathing, your timing." I turned and ran. The flashlight clattered behind me. I sprinted down the aisle, boots slamming against the concrete, heart thunder in my ears. And behind me I heard it walking. Not running, walking, each step perfectly synchronized with my own, only slightly delayed, like an echo trying to close the gap. I slammed through the steel door into the sunlight and sprinted toward my car. The shadow behind me stretched unnaturally long across the asphalt, like it was reaching for me even before the body casting it could follow. I jumped into the car, slammed the lock, and fumbled the keys. Through the windshield, I saw it step into the open, still wearing my shape but flickering at the edges like reality struggled to contain it. Its eyes, wrong, unfinished, too reflective, fixed on mine. Its mouth opened wider than mine ever could. "Ready," it whispered. I floored the gas. I didn't look back. But even as I drove away, even as distance grew, I felt something inside my bones shift, some subtle vibration like a recording sinking to its source. It didn't matter how far I drove. It knew me now. It had almost finished learning. For 6 months now, I've been living like a man running from his own shadow, which would be insane under normal circumstances, except the thing following me isn't a shadow. Not anymore. Not since the night it stepped out of the ceiling of that warehouse and started wearing my movements like a costume that only needed a few last adjustments before it could replace me completely. So I've learned to move constantly, to change towns, motels, and cot rentals every few days. Always traveling with my black hoodie pulled tight and my steel-toe boots laced so I can run at any second, because the truth is simple. The entity doesn't need permission to walk into your life once it's mapped enough of you. It just needs time. And time is the one thing I've been running out of since the moment it whispered, "Ready," with my own voice. I thought distance might weaken whatever tether connected it to me. So in the first month I drove across 3 states, sleeping in rest stops with the dome light on, covering every reflective surface in rental rooms with towels, blankets, newspaper, anything to prevent it from appearing in a flicker of glass or a warped video feed. But the deeper I fled into nowhere places, the more I realized it didn't track me by sight or by sound. It tracked me by familiarity. A kind of identity gravity that pulled it closer every time I thought about it, spoke about it, remembered its shape, so running only slowed it, never stopped it. I kept searching for answers nonetheless, for anyone connected to Project Mirrorgate, for survivors, witnesses, anyone who'd seen the mimicry events the government had hidden away like a wound too deep to expose to the public. But every lead either vanished into dead ends, or led to men who warned me not to say my own name out loud after dark, not to sleep in rooms with mirrors, not to allow my reflection to exist unguarded for more than a few seconds. One man, an ex-technician who'd worked on the early anomaly logs, told me something that made the hair on my arms rise. Once it starts rehearsing you, it doesn't stop. It doesn't get bored. It doesn't forget. It finishes the performance. When I asked what that meant, his face went hollow. It replaces you perfectly. The original becomes redundant. The word haunted me more than anything the creature had done. Human beings weren't supposed to be redundant. But I was becoming redundant with every hour it spent rehearsing my identity. The second month, I began noticing small timing errors in myself, delayed reactions, subtle stutters in movement, like I was glitching inside my own body. Sometimes when I reached for a doorknob, my hand would hesitate, hovering a fraction of a second as if waiting for a cue. Sometimes in the mirror, my reflection blinked 1 beat too late. That's when I smashed the mirrors in the motel bathroom, wrapped my bleeding knuckles in duct tape, and told myself it was just stress, just sleep deprivation. But when I finally slept that night, even for an hour, I dreamed of standing over myself with a camera, leaning closer, whispering instructions for how I should breathe. The third month, I started seeing headlines about men disappearing from apartments across the state, all of them found with their phones wiped except for a single message, recording complete. The authorities dismissed the cases as unrelated, but I recognized the pattern. I recognized the timing. The mimicry events were spreading, or accelerating. By the 4th month, I had stopped speaking entirely unless absolutely necessary, because the entity learned fastest from sound, the cadence, the tone, the spacing between words, and the last thing I wanted to give it was perfect audio reference. I communicated with cashiers through nods and gestures, never using my name, always paying in cash. I avoided cameras, reflective windows, and polished metal surfaces. But even with all that caution, I couldn't escape the signs that it was still out there sharpening itself into the final version of me. A stranger approached me at a gas station, confusion in his eyes, asking how I had gotten across the parking lot so fast when he'd just spoken to me by Pump 7. I hadn't been anywhere near Pump 7. A motel clerk told me she'd already checked me in earlier that morning. Same clothes, same face, same voice. Even worse, she insisted I'd smiled at her, but I don't smile anymore. Not since the thing tried to imitate it. By the 5th month, sleep became dangerous. Every time I drifted off, even for a moment, I sensed it drawing nearer, as if sleep lowered some internal guard and allowed it to study details it couldn't reach while I was awake. I started sleeping in rotating patterns, 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, never letting myself enter deep sleep. My mind grew dull, my thoughts tangled, and one morning I woke up sitting upright in bed with my phone in my hand, camera open, recording myself. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember hitting record. I deleted the footage without watching it, but the timestamp was what terrified me. It was 3:12 a.m., the same minute every recording had appeared in the beginning, which means I hadn't stopped it. I had joined it. The 6th month is now, tonight. This moment as I write in a roadside diner with bright lights and no reflective surfaces, and only 2 other customers who keep their distance because I look like a man who hasn't slept in weeks. The entity hasn't shown itself to me in days, and that scares me more than when it stood in the warehouse wearing a half-finished version of my face. Silence from it never means absence. It means completion. And tonight, just before I walked into this diner, I saw something that made my skin crawl so violently I nearly collapsed in the parking lot. A man stepped out of the restroom, wearing a black hoodie, dark jeans, steel-toe boots. My clothes, my stride, my posture. But he didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge me. He just walked past the windows and disappeared into the night like someone following a script I wasn't allowed to read yet. And when I reached the restroom door, I saw the final message carved into the metal surface. Not scratched, not written, but engraved with inhuman precision. You are now the recording. I don't know what that means, not fully, but I know this: the world isn't watching me anymore. The entity is, and I think it's waiting for the moment my identity becomes redundant enough for it to step into my life. When it does, nobody will know the difference. Nobody but me, if I still exist at all.